Okay, this is March 15th, 2019. I'm about to begin reading Slip or Jump for the first time in a couple years at least. And at this point in the story, Sam Steele has begun his adventure, his road trip, his attempt to find something worth living for after a really devastating chain of events. Sam walked in the state park and took a deep breath of the damp air. No one was around, as far as he could tell. Memories of happy times began to gently flood his mind. These memories led to the less than happy memories, though were not regretted. The freshly cut grass smelled just the same as when he had been there for the first time. The lawn was still mowed closely, buffering a nicely paved driveway which cut through the forest. He walked on the driveway for a few minutes, thinking about the gravity that somehow held him to the ground, how unlikely everything which allowed him to live seemed. He slipped into the forest when a shed and truck became visible in the distance, where a ranger surely sat waiting to take money. It was not that he did not have the money, but he did think that people should not have to pay to enjoy nature, and occasionally enjoyed breaking rules. So he walked around the shed, through the forest, in a half circle that probably ended up having a diameter of about 500 yards. Then he walked on the paved road again for a few minutes until he saw the familiar parking lot. Her blue Volvo was sitting there, with the distinguishing white peace sign on the rear bumper. Sam smiled. The sun was even beginning to come out. He walked across the gravel parking lot and onto the trail which went through the forest. Everything was dripping. The ravines were covered with thick, dewy moss on bluish rocks. There were even a few species of trees, ferns, shrubs, and herbs which he couldn't identify. He knew almost all of them in Maine, and the fact that he could not identify them in Georgia really did not bother him. To think of trees and other natural things in terms of names assigned by man is to think of man, which for the moment he was trying not to do. That tree, he thought, is beautiful. He walked for a while without seeing anyone, but this changed when he came around a bend of the trail. There hadn't been another car in the parking lot, so it was surprising to see people other than Britt. It was a pleasant surprise, actually. There were two of them standing on the trail, a man and a woman. Both wore floppy hats and khaki-colored shirts and cargo pants. Both had binoculars. The man had them in his hands, in front of his eyes, looking up at what looked to be a very difficult angle. The woman was kneeling down to look at something on the ground. She walked up to them and looked down at the intricate purple orchid with white highlights that the woman was observing. Sam walked up to them. My mistake. Morning, he said, which he had decided was an age-old celebration of making it through the night. Beautiful day, and that's a beautiful flower. She looked up and smiled, standing. Her hair was white, her face friendly. Yes, there is beauty this morning. Her smile remained. The man was still looking through his binoculars, not seeming to even notice Sam. He looked to be about 55 years old, too. Jenny, he said, I swear that I saw it this time. Shaking her head with that nice smile, she looked to Sam. He's been looking since 1978 for this bird, which was the biggest woodpecker in the U.S. The man interrupted her, still looking through the binoculars. Is the biggest woodpecker. The Lord God bird has a wingspan of over 2.5 feet long, a black and white body, a golden eye, and a wicked beak of ivory on a red-crested head that can destroy any tree east of the big river. But the things are pacifists, so they pick on trees that are already dead. It's extinct, she said. No, it's not, he said, as if he had said it 1,000 times before. The ivory-billed woodpecker is alive and well in the state of Georgia. She spoke to Sam again. We are hardly even in its historical range. and there hasn't been a confirmed sighting since the 1950s, and that was in Louisiana, not here. Carl sees one every time he takes a walk in the forest, and that's a lot, now that he's retired. He said there is very good evidence that they were seen in 2004 and a few times since. Not in Georgia, she said. Sam finally broke in and said, did ivory hunters drive them to this disputed extinction? The binoculars finally came down. The man's face was kind. His eyes were close together behind glasses with circular frames, and he was very tan. Probably not, but the natives did use their bills for necklaces, and actually, in mid-sentence, his right hand bolted from his side, and he pointed up. His eyes lit, and he exclaimed, "Prothonotary warbler!" "Excuse him," said his wife. "He just heard a bird." The man smiled. What does it say about a man who understands what birds are saying better than what humans are saying? For a while, there were only chirps. Sam thought a few moments and replied. That he was wise enough to take the time to learn the more beautiful, honest of the two languages, Sam said. After listening a little while longer, Sam asked, "What were you saying about that big woodpecker?" The tone of the man's voice changed from merely informational, professional, to solemn and heart-wrenched. "We cut down their trees. That is the problem. Everything goes to shit when the trees are cut. But a few birds made it." To himself, he whispered, "They just have to have." Watching a species struggle with extinction is especially interesting through the eyes of a species struggling with extinction. Beauty and tragedy are laced in every move of both the watcher and the watched. There really is something to finding what others say is gone, Sam said after a few formulating moments. "And this bird that you describe, I believe that it is out there. Keep looking, man." The man finally smiled, the smile that his face indicated was there often. "Thank you," he said emphatically, and then looked to his wife. They seemed very happy. She smiled too. It seemed so very nice, what they had. Quietly, the three of them walked down the trail until it forked. The birder and the birder supporter went right. Sam went left after wishing them luck. It was not long before he could hear the steady flow of water nearby. He imagined her sitting on the rock that looked like the palm of a hand beside the copper-colored creek. The trail became rocky and the smell of the place was intensely natural, like wet stone and soil. Walking alone on a familiar trail where the last time it was walked with another warm hand is cold, but one must keep on walking. The trees turned to shrubs, the trail turned to, and there he saw her with her nose in a book. She must have heard him coming, because the pure red cover was replaced by her slightly readable face. Reserved happiness, he thought. Sam walked toward her with a small grin on his face. She spoke first, and her slight southern drawl entered his ears. He at one time found that drawl to be cute. "How are you feeling, sir?" "As healthy as a sick horse, madame," he said. She smiled at their old greeting joke, even though it was not the same as it used to be, and he sat beside her, taking off the backpack and leaning it on the wrist of the rock, the part where a suicide scar might be. "So," she said, "what's up with the bandana?" "I liked the way it looked on a friend of mine. It's nice to think of friend days." "Want a peach?" he asked. "No," she said. He reached into his bag and pulled a peach out. It tasted amazing, but Britt kept looking at him without saying anything, so he spat out something to turn back her eyes. "How has that nice new job in the city been treating you?" "Oh," she said, seeming to liven up a bit, "it's amazing. Everything is going how I planned it." "Good," he said, "and at the very least you won't have to deal with the winters up there anymore." She hesitated a moment, with eyes which seemed to be about to say something that she did not want to say. "Sam, why are we here?" "I don't know," he said. I always find myself wondering that. She looked at him somewhat coldly and rubbed her temples with her very white fingers and then pushed her very dark brown hair out of her very blue eyes. She looked good, even though she was wearing old jeans and a plaid shirt that looked to be Tom's. She had been at Rob's wedding and was a very good friend of Erica's. At the wedding, Sam had not spoken to her besides to ask her to meet him where she now sat, without Tom. He looked at the ruby ring on her left hand, which he had not known about. Probably not invited, he thought. After a few more moments, Sam broke the silence. It's amazing how much can change in a short amount of time, he said. Yeah, Tom and I already have the date set, she said excitedly. I'm sure that Erica told you about the engagement. His brother's wife had not, surprisingly. The ceremony is going to be outside in his hometown, she said, hopefully as the sun sets on a beach, probably. Not sure if there are any good beaches around there. We really are excited, though. He said, what was it? Well, not that long ago we were talking, and she was not and never had been anywhere near concise in speaking, and would go on for a very long time if allowed to, saying nothing. He couldn't stand it and decided to answer the question that he had evaded earlier. Britt, I experienced death last summer. I thought that I finally needed to tell you, as an explanation for why it might have fallen apart between us. Honestly, I really don't know why it fell apart, but I did change. Silence, of course, returned. She knew that he was serious. How? She asked sincerely, with a tone of panic. What happened to you? It doesn't matter, he said. All that matters is that it got me thinking, which has led me here. There's just so much that if I had died I would have missed. I just can't bring myself to do what you are doing right now. And I'm sorry. She didn't look cold anymore, and suddenly looked like a sad little girl. But what do you even want? Why did you turn down that job after graduation? Where are you going to get money? He shrugged and smiled as he thought of what he was about to say. Lou Reed said it best. Money is like us in time. It lies, but can't stand up. She gave him another disgusted look. Are you afraid that making a little money would corrupt you or something? She asked. No, he said. Money does not corrupt a person. It just magnifies corrupt people, allows them to show what they really are. Oh my God, Sam. How do you come up with all these answers? I've asked a lot of questions, he said, and anyways, the job wasn't right. I want to be my own person, I guess, make my own decisions. Ingrained in almost everyone's psyche is self-denial, which I just cannot do anymore. Propriety makes me sick. We've talked about this. I just can't allow myself to become a cold, professional person like I'm expected to. A person like you, he said. Sam, she said, you have to grow up. He laughed silently, throwing a pit of the peach into the weeds. She continued, seriously, looking at you is like seeing a dead German shepherd at the side of the road, which is terribly sad. But what's worse is that it has that fucking collar on. And I know the owners. Sometimes I feel like I was the driver. He looked at her and nodded his head, thinking, clever girl. Britt, he said, I was the driver. And anyways, I just feel like everything could be so much more beautiful. I feel guilty that everything is so easy for me and that so many people try so hard, getting nowhere. Actually, I think most people just give up. And I just can't stop thinking about how close to the end I was. How close I always am. Post-traumatic stress, I think. Sam, that's serious. I've mostly made it through, he said. What I'm trying to do is experience life without all of my old crutches for a while. Life stripped of diversions is terrifying, but purifying. I want to feel in a way that has not been sculpted by other people before I commit to anything. If I don't do this now, I never will be able to. For a while, her blue eyes looked at his not blue eyes. "Oh, Sam," she said, "wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to die?" "No," he said, "there would be even less urgency to live, I think. I don't think that I could keep on living if I didn't know that I was going to die someday. It'd be frightening to not be able to die." After a while of silence, she said, "Do you ever feel like you just couldn't die, even if you wanted to?" "Yeah," he said, "actually I do. Like that tiger that we saw at Central Park Zoo, just lying there on the cement as people outside of the cage laugh at it. There's a feeling of being trapped, knowing that you're being laughed at, but also knowing that you cannot escape, living somewhere that is not your place." "Sam," she said, "I was just thinking about that poor tiger at the zoo too. It was so sad. I guess great minds think alike." "Maybe they do once in a while," he said, "but it's the not so great minds that cannot help but think alike. And that's why the idea of being condemned to live here forever is so damn scary." She looked at him, nodding her head a little, and smiled like she used to. Then she rested her head on his shoulder, which felt nice. Her hair smelled good. "Thought it'd always be like this," he thought. For a while they just sat there, thinking about how it used to be. He reached into his pocket. "Can you take this?" he asked. She lifted her head from his shoulder and looked at the iPod, shaking her head. "But you don't love anything like you love music." "I'm trying to find new things," he said. He took the headphones off of his neck, too. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, gotta lose the old things. It's funny how music can bring back memories, so clear that you are there again. Every time you listen to a song, it's like plugging into the past. Many a good song has been ruined that way." "I know, Sam. And it's just about out of juice anyway. I forgot the charging cable." She took the device and headphones. Then she put her head back on his shoulder, and they continued to sit in their old spot. They stayed there in silence, watching the water going over logs and rocks, ever replacing itself in a smooth flow. They listened to the birds sing, to the insects rattle, and to the frogs making noises which sounded like the single strum of a banjo. If the frogs ever got it right, then they could really scare people who are afraid of hillbillies, Sam thought. A large duck was followed closely by a line of tiny ducklings, fighting the current and diving to see what was at the gravelly bottom. It didn't take long for them to pop back up. The fragrance of all of the flowering plants were subtly, beautifully present. A breeze blew against the current of the river, and golden grains of pollen drifted from the pine trees. It felt wonderful, it felt natural upon the rock which held the two in its palm. "I have to get going," she said.